In South Africa, the companies there sometimes mine down 20,000 feet and find perfect shafts with such an accuracy of laser precision that they don't know what they are, so they wall them up. There is an official policy in mining that if you find something that doesn't fit, you bury it. It's like the Navy says, if you can't explain it away, destroy it. And the mines in South Africa, from the central point of South Africa right down the way through, number between 10 to 20 million small gold mines. Why so many? Because they were over 250,000 years. That's quite small, they're not like modern mines. They use acoustics. And you've touched on here with Warminster about sound and acoustics. Early man of your species knew about acoustics and resonance. There's a book over there I've donated called In the Name of the Gods, touches on it. There's a few of them available on the web, I think. I had a very minor amount to do with that, only post-production. The human voice range is extraordinarily important in activating a resonance. When you go to the pyramid, you have various chambers. Let's just deal with one, rather than complicating it. And it's said to you that this was a tomb. I don't think so. And in these tombs was found absolutely nothing. Because the importance of them is the space. An organ pipe contains nothing. Thank you for nodding. Contains nothing. What it contains is a tone. And the tone will modify the air and the ether or the aether which is in it. Up until a few tens of years ago, maybe 100 years ago, there was a concept of aether or ether. We don't like to use the term now because we can't explain it and we can't manipulate it. Well, some people can. Behind all matter is aether, ether. Behind you is your spirit. Your spirit is my concern. You will eventually die, all of you, biologically. My best friend is in hospital right now. You know there is more to you than what is sitting there. You know you go on. Otherwise, what's the point of life? You are here in a school, one of the hardest schools known, to learn about your deficiencies, of which I have many. As with you, otherwise I would not be here. You are here to learn about life, not about death. Although in the ancient world, death was seen as a transition to another life. The Egyptians spent most of their time preparing for the next life, creating thought forms, creating artifacts, creating concepts about something that they would go to. They spent most of their life preparing for what they would go to, not what was evident in their life that day. They lived in hope, they did not live in fear. You are invited to live in fear. It's the most fundamental con that could be put upon you. while we're there, you're probably aware that there were some shafts that went out of the chambers. They were actually blanked off. They were not through to the chamber, and they were blanked off there. And you probably recall a little robot crawling up it. It's quite small. The shafts, literally, I might draw them in reality, are about that dimension. They are sighting lines. And they go to, what a surprise, Orion. Because Orion is one of your closest associated systems. Let's do that. Keep an eye on time. Who are the aliens? Well, you are, I've told you that. You have a number of aliens, more than you could possibly recognize. Let's consider a metaphor. Here is the Pacific Ocean. Australia's down there somewhere. And you are Hawaii. We say you're Hawaii. And you have small indigenous population. And you have people who are traveling across here. And people are traveling across here. And people are traveling across here. And they're going past Hawaii, where they need resources. So you're a way station that is useful for picking up resources. You're more than that. You're also a safari park. And you have game wardens. You are the wildebeest on the zebra, and there's a few lions and tigers out there. And you have a few overseers who basically try not to interact with you because they would consider that as damaging your cultural evolution. Whenever a higher civilization comes into contact with a technologically lesser civilization, it usually has a detrimental effect. You've seen this in colonization throughout the last 300-400 years. It's very difficult for the lesser civilization to not place the higher civilization on some kind of pedestal and treat them as gods. And it might well be that the higher civilization likes to be treated as gods. And that's what happened when the helper, who was there for all that period of time, became a free man, as they would say in the States. The con was that the higher civilization who had run the place were now elevated to the level of gods. And they played along with that because that served their purpose admirably. So the helper became a disciple or pupil or subservient willing slave, as opposed to one who just said, go here, go there. He wanted the people who repaired, I'm talking very accurately, the Great Pyramids, actually willingly gave of their services to please the gods. Outside the Sphinx, there's a stele from Tutmosis III that says, I did this. No, he didn't, he only repaired the pores. You can see the blocks in the pores that he repaired. Egyptians were very fond of putting up stele saying, I did this. It's a human characteristic. You recognize it. I hear you saying, and by the way, I've all given you a card, and in a little while, I'd like you, with whatever writing materials you've got available, or one of these pens, to write on that card, if you want to, a question of no more than 5 words or 6 words. Reason being, I don't want a discourse, I don't want a lecture. Okay, you've only got 5 or 6 words for a question. And tomorrow morning, I will have read all of those cards and I will try and answer every single question. Would you also please to write the number of your key ticket so that you are anonymous. But if I say, hey, by the way, 89, the answer to your question is, then 89 knows that I'm responding to that question. Right, we're losing the track, losing the time. Now, who is coming here? Who's going past the island? Who's making a stopover? Who lives here apart from you? Well, many. Let's start with the ones that are the problems. Epsilon Eridani, second planet out. Problem. Treat her as a resource. Syrians. Comme ci, comme ça. Lyrans. Quite nice people, Lyrans. Pleiadians. Who are the Pleiadians? You are technically part of the Pleiadian spiral. Here's your galaxy. So many spirals. You are part of here. In the intercourse of that one to that one, you are on the end of the line of the Pleiadian spiral, which is 129 suns. You are number 129. And counting. The Pleiadians feel sorry for you. They give you the benefit of the doubt. You do some terrible things. And the people who are above you do even worse. Pleiadians look a lot like me. Thousands came here. Some of you in this audience today. Most of you forget. Please don't forget. We are losing the battle, friends. To whom? Well, the people who regard you as a resource. Who and what do they do to you? Well, you started off as helpers, and then something happened about 10 to 12,000 years ago, which is biblically recorded and recorded in all ancient literature, which is called the flood. History before that was by definition antediluvian, anti before the flood. The civilization which was, thank you very much, was pandemic to the earth, all over the earth. Some have called it, or given it the name Lemuria or Mu, which is just an invention, but it gives a concept, was here for 250,000, maybe 450,000 years. They used natural energy, they used pyramids, they used stone. If you go to the sarcophagi, which was allegedly for the burial chambers of bulls, and it is a load of bull, you'll find that the sarcophagi are massive structures with a lid which is like that. And this sarcophagi weighs 100 tons, and it only got down there because it got in there when they built the catacomb, because you can't get it out the door. In the same way that you can't get out the sarcophagus that is actually in the king's chamber, because there's not room to get it out the door. And they are very thick, about that thick. And they are made principally out of forms of granite. And for any of you know about phonographs, you will know that at the end of a phonograph, on a needle, there's a pickup, and there's a record, and this little vibration is causing a piezoelectric effect on that crystal, which is giving an electric current to the gramophone, which gives you sound out of that little crystal. Now, if you consider that you've got a sarcophagi, you've got a pyramid chamber, which is hundreds and hundreds of tons, how much electricity do you think you will get out of it if you resonate it? A hell of a lot. And what's more, you will get a piezoelectric plasma effect such that if you go into such chambers which are resonance tuned and you sing and overtone the right level of sound, you will produce manifestations. There is a technique in the lab by which you have a chamber and you have a loudspeaker and you have another loudspeaker and you do this with the sound and things will levitate using sound. Using sound. Sound is fundamental. It's an acoustic wavelength. It is different from an electromagnetic wavelength. And you can use sound. And the lamas in Nepal and in the Himalaya, before they were educated, used to use sound using horns and cymbals vibrating. Imagine a number of these in an arc to a focal point where there was a block. This was witnessed by a colonial officer in about the 1930s, and the block would levitate by the same method I referred to before up the cliff to whatever they were building up here in this cave over there. In your being, in your sound, in your meditation with sound, you have phenomenal abilities. You have the ability to see, to travel, to move, to influence, and to block. To block because you are being impacted all the time by sounds that are from systems that are designed to keep you in line, keep all the ducks in line. Excuse me a moment. My DNA is in much better shape than yours. Warminster refers, and my previous colleague referred to sound. What was that? It's very easy to explain. Infrasound. Infrasound is about 7 hertz. You can't hear 7 hertz, you can feel it. The French were trying to develop an acoustic weapon at 7 hertz. Most of the scientists who were working on the project died. They exploded because your organs have resonance frequencies which are around about 7 hertz. You have ultra frequencies running into megahertz. And all of you use bloody microwave, don't you? I've got one here. I'll show you a trick. I hate these things. It's just a regular Mickey Mouse iPhone. Now I want to show you something. This could save your life. There's that. It's switched off 90% of the time, or put it on aeroplane mode. And behind it, in this pouch, there's that. There's an ordinary piece of cardboard with some baker foil wrapped around it. Wrapped around it several times, it has to meet at the edges. Acts as a shield. Bounces the transmissions away from your body because you make most of your white cells in your pelvis. American ladies keep their things here in their bra, and they get a high incidence of breast cancer. Because if you change the microwave frequency of the metabolism of the cell, you will produce rogue DNA, RNA, and you will produce something that doesn't know where to go, and that's what you call a carcinogenic disease, and that's called cancer. Got about 15, I think got more. Keep going. Now, while on that, you have a serious problem, not you personally, you're actually relatively shielded from it, called Fukushima, or Fukushima. And that was a particular kind of nuclear power station that suffered a tsunami and melted down. 3 of the cores went through in 3 days, and is issuing 450 metric tons of radioactive water into the Pacific every single day. Cesium-137, strontium-90, Cesium-134, and a whole bunch of other shit. and before it reached the Californian coast. Mrs. Clinton had an answer to this. She stopped monitoring it. Because what you don't know about, or what the Americans don't know about, you don't need to worry about. You're all going to get cancer over there in 15 years, because that's how long it takes. The RNA DNA degradation takes about 15 years. A friend of mine was on the team that went to Chernobyl, flying into Chernobyl. He was 66 years old at the time, and his Geiger counter mechanisms were going off the scale. And he said, I wasn't bothered. It's way down the line for me. I'll be dying anyway. I'll be jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. But the younger members of the team, that was quite serious at that time. And Fukushima is contaminating, has already contaminated the whole of the northeastern Pacific. For Christ's sake, don't eat anything out of the northeast Pacific. Unless you want to go and, go and take some cyanide, it'll be quicker and less painful. But that's just about a minor thing. That's in the water. Just out of interest, for those of you asking the question, before it gets to the Atlantic is 7 years. Because of deep Atlantic currents that start in the Indian Ocean, come around up the coast of South America, over across the Atlantic and back again. 7 years. You have 7 years before the Atlantic is equally contaminated, as is the North Pacific. You see the problems I have to deal with. There are no answers. You just have to eat from fish farms on land. Don't eat seafood in the Northeast Pacific. I digress. I am not a ufologist. I have never been a ufologist. I am an analyst. I analyze data. Lots and lots of data. Millions of bits of data on all kinds of things. I was invited to do some study in my younger days, which resulted in Warminster and a number of other things. And then Wales, let's cover Wales. We're on the subject, went to Wales, paid to go to Wales, West Wales, where the focus went. Brawdy. What was Brawdy? Brawdy was a undercover, bit of a joke, US oceanographic submarine listening station, by which you send out, you put out microphones into the Atlantic. There's one in Newfoundland and one in Greenland, and you listen to the noise, the infrasound of propellers, and you can identify the individual boat. And you can identify where it is, where it's going, who's on it. You can hear a Russian if you listen very carefully. Or if you're not interested in the Russians, you can hear something else. And you also pick up anomalous readings. Objects that are moving at 150 knots underwater. A nuclear submarine, if you're lucky, will do 48 knots underwater. They mostly just drift about with their engines turned off, in effect, because any decent spy satellite will pick up the warm water coming out the back of a nuclear sub. We've known that since 1964. Brawdy was looking at subs and looking at UFOs, if you wish, or USOs. And the aliens, thought, bloody hell, not too keen on this lot, mate. So we'll take a look at you. So the aliens started looking at Brawdy. And lo and behold, the Sun, I think, coined the phrase, the Welsh Triangle. They invented it, and then I was paid to go down there under the cover of writing a book and find out what the hell was going on. And it turned out that people were seeing infusions, intrusions into the base. And these guys are pretty smart. They could actually they could actually interface with the computers. They could inject false images. They could take down the computers. They could switch them off. They could switch them on, and they could walk through fences, which is very alarming if you're a GI carrying an M16. And then, not in that instance, but in other cases in Americas, when they're trying to fire an M16, when the weapon disintegrates in front of you with a flash and you're left with a pile of ash on the ground, that's a little bit disquieting. Why do governments not admit to UFOs? Because they can't do anything about it. If you've just come out of the Second World War and won against two major nations, Japan and Germany, and you're suddenly confronted with a series of so-called crashes, how are you going to go to your people and say, we've just won the freedom, chaps, but hang on, there's these guys out there who can run circles around everything we know. How are you going to say that? You can't possibly say that. Forrestal wanted to say that. A relative of a friend of mine who's now in hospital fighting for his life. Natural causes. They killed Forrestal. They threw him out of a window 16 floors up, the Mephisto Naval Hospital, I believe. He wanted to tell you, good man, you are not fit to know. That's what everybody says. Right, let's look at the time. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, I will be going into more detail. Today is very much a sketchy kind of overview. I apologize if I'm leaving holes in this. I usually give 2 to 3 hours. I haven't given a lecture for 17 years. I write memos about 3 times a day to the idiots who run your bloody countries, trying to get them to listen. But no, they are politicians, aren't they? And they know better than you. Right, where shall we go now? Think. So, where are you now? Dare we tell you where you are now? You are on the brink. Why are you on the brink? Because people are playing brinkmanship. And this is to do with something called ego. It's also to do with money. And it's also to do with control. And this is a very complex subject. Various people think you can change your systems. I don't think you can. I think you're locked into money. You've had it for a very long time, thousands of years. I don't think it can change. I think what needs to be changed is attitude. It's not money that is the root of evil. It's the what people do with it. They see it as a control. Now, business as usual. Everything was going along tickety-boo, and then some time ago, things got a bit out of hand. And we have the Chinese. I'm not going to say too much about this, but the Chinese suddenly became probably the principal superpower in the world, truth be known, economically. I don't say militarily, but economically. And various people who shall be nameless, but you could look to the West, are trying to have an impact on the Chinese in a most irresponsible manner. My job to stop you blowing yourself up. And on 2 incidences I've succeeded in doing that, along with a lot of other people, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You don't know how close you came. You came close. You're coming close again. Whoever, whatever, whether it be human or AI, which stands for artificial intelligence, has to be stopped. Because AI intelligence has no respect of human life. When Arthur C. Clarke wrote his famous work, and the computer HAL is eliminating the humans on the flight because they are the inefficient element of the mission, you are in nearly exactly the same position right now. This is what Stephen Hawking was referring to. Be wary of AI. Because if you give over your civilization and your military to AI, you are toast. The Chinese switched off their supercomputer half an hour after something happened, which I'm not going into. That was a very wise decision, because if one supercomputer starts fighting another supercomputer, God only knows what happens. What happened going back 12, 1,000, 10,000, 10,600, doesn't really matter. What happened to lose all this civilization? What happened that you can go on the web and find beautiful pyramids sitting on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, just off Cuba, I believe. You can go around various other parts of the world, you can find pyramids, you can find ancient civilization about artifacts. What happened? Well, we don't really know. We're trying to find out, but certainly something happened. There was an ice age just prior to it, which means your poles were principally iced up. And then when ice melts, as with a glacier, it does a very funny thing. It forms a dam at the front edge. Always does this, never quite worked out why. And behind you get meltwater, and the meltwater builds up pressure, and it starts to undermine the glacial dam until eventually it cracks and it gives way. And then you have huge tsunami-type floods. This is why you can find mammoth. You can go to Russia and you can order a mammoth steak. It's only 12,000 years old, or whatever, and it's still got buttercups in its stomach from when it was eating, when it was fresh frozen. So whatever fresh frozen it, or fresh freezed it, fresh frozen, I can't get the words, it did it pretty quick, because if you don't do that, you get decay. So these dams broke, and you get huge tsunamis, and you also probably get crustal shield, because what we know is that this moved by 3¼ degrees. The actual rotational pivot of the Earth moved by 3¼ degrees. Now, if you're in a car, one of the old exercises when I was working for the people was, I'm an advanced driver, is you put a glass on the dashboard of the car with water, probably up there, and you have to drive at 60 miles an hour and do all kinds of maneuvers and not have the glass spill over and spill water. You know as well as I do, if you make any kind of acceleration or deacceleration, that water will pop over that glass. Now equally you've got oceans, and if you move the dynamic of those oceans, this is what happened in Fukushima in a different way, which I'll explain, you're going to get a lot of water moving. And a tsunami is different from a wave. This is a wave. A tsunami is a wall of water which is heading in that direction. So when the first wave hits, this behind here keeps on coming. If any of you looked at the Fukushima onshore footage, you will see that's what happens. It just keeps coming. It's not a wave. It's a tsunami. You get a tsunami 600 feet high, you've got problems. In South Africa, where I was referring to the gold mines, there's a tremendous amount of silt that covered up many of those gold mines. That's why you can only see them from the air with infrared photography. And if you work out how much silt would need to be deposited on Southern Africa to get to that inland area, that's a hell of a wave that would do that, carrying all that silt. The other thing about tsunamis is they carry a lot of debris. As you've seen in the Fukushima footage, they carry a lot of debris. Moving along. Getting rather tangential here, I apologise. Where the hell does UFOs coming into this? We've moved a long way. UFO is no more than me talking about your bloody cars. Do I refer to you as he's got a Ford Escort and he's got a Jaguar? No, it's not what the car is, it's who's in it and what they're doing. Perhaps it's a Centurion tank, perhaps it's an ambulance. Don't spend your time wasting whether you know whether there's cars out there or not, please. There was a project in the States, television, old television, cathode ray tube. These people were in communication for 12 years with information beamed into the television from the aliens, technical stuff, educational stuff. The aliens gave up. They said they were too slow, and the Americans complained they had made no money out of the information that they had received. Aliens don't use money, what a silly idea. Money was invented years, decades ago. It's a method of rationing your poverty, not wealth. Wealth is goodwill and love, and giving and sharing. 5 minutes. So where do we go from there? What the hell do we do? Right. I'm going to give you 3 things you can do. Think about it. I would say, for the purpose of security purposes, everything I've said in the last hour is complete fiction. I made it up. There are less than 150 people in this room and we are not on television. I know the rules. It's all fiction. Don't even think about it. That gets me off the hook. Now, go away and talk about it. Talk to people who you think will listen. Don't bother with talking to the idiots who've got no other interest than pizza and listening to Homer Simpson. What a waste of time. Do not become aggressive. That does not work. Revolutions only revolve to their point of origin. They achieve absolutely nothing. You have to grow up. Not just you people in this room, because this message may go out, it will probably be completely ignored, but some of you can grow up and some of you can go forward. Thank you for listening.
Peter Paget, ladies and gentlemen, and don't forget, as Peter said, he's doing a full 3 hours tomorrow morning, so if you want to talk to Peter, arrange for that, come and see him tomorrow morning. I'm sure it'll be worth listening to. I'm sure you found that really interesting anyway, so 3 hours more of that, and you never know what he's going to come out with and tell you. Now we're going to take a 15-minute break for coffee. Could you all try and be as spot on as you can on those 15 minutes, because the next speaker will want to get going, and it's